Picture this. You've gone through most of your life convinced that you're average at best. Maybe you've even told yourself that you're below average, because women aren't openly throwing themselves at you or declaring how handsome you are. You watch other guys get obvious attention, whether it's women laughing loudly at their jokes or making bold moves toward them, and you assume that means they must be the attractive ones while you're not. But what if that conclusion is completely wrong? What if the reality is that you're far more attractive than you think, but because you don't understand how female psychology works, you've been missing the signs all along? The truth is that most men underestimate themselves dramatically because they expect attraction to look the way it does in movies, loud, obvious, and undeniable, when in reality it's quiet, subtle, and incredibly easy to overlook. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most men have absolutely no clue where they actually rank in terms of attractiveness because they're measuring themselves against completely false standards. They think attraction works through grand gestures, overt compliments, or bold confessions, when in reality, women rarely operate that way. Female attraction is far more indirect, relying on subtle behavioral cues, positioning, and energy rather than explicit declarations. And because men are wired to be direct, they often miss those signals entirely. The result is a world full of men walking around thinking they're less desirable than they truly are. Ironically, the men who are the most attractive are often the ones most convinced they're not. Think about how you've been conditioned. Movies, television, even social media have trained you to expect attraction to look like a scene from a romantic comedy, where the woman becomes obviously flustered, blushes uncontrollably, and stumbles over her words before boldly confessing her interest. Men are used to being straightforward. If a man likes a woman, he'll usually approach, initiate conversation, or clearly express his intentions. Because this is how men operate. They assume women will communicate in the same way, but women rarely do. Instead, they communicate attraction through subtle cues that preserve their sense of dignity, maintain plausible deniability, and reduce the risk of rejection. Ironically, the men who doubt themselves the most are often the ones who have the highest level of female interest. Attractive men tend to have higher standards, so they compare themselves not to the average man, but to the most successful, polished, or genetically gifted examples of masculinity. They see actors, athletes, and models, and assume that unless they reach that level, they must be falling short. Meanwhile, men who are less attractive often overestimate themselves precisely because they compare only to those below them. This creates a strange paradox. The most attractive men are often blind to their own appeal, while the least attractive can sometimes be the most delusional about it. Women, on the other hand, are constantly scanning and evaluating without even realizing they're doing it. Within seconds of seeing you, her brain processes dozens of details: your posture, grooming, energy, social awareness, even subtle indicators of confidence and status. Most of this assessment happens beneath conscious awareness, which means she can be attracted to you before she even realizes why. That attraction, however, doesn't translate into bold action. Instead, it creates what psychologists call approach avoidance conflict. She feels drawn to you, but at the same time, she doesn't want to look too obvious, risk rejection, or make herself vulnerable. That conflict produces specific behaviors, lingering glances, subtle positioning, repeated interactions that signal her attraction in ways men often miss. If you've ever noticed a woman holding your gaze just a little longer than necessary and then quickly looking away, you might have dismissed it as nothing, but that's one of the strongest indicators of interest. What makes it so confusing is that after creating that brief spark of connection, she quickly diverts her eyes, making it easy for you to assume it wasn't meaningful. But then you catch her doing it again later, and again after that. This pattern of repeated glances isn't accidental. It's her way of engaging while still maintaining cover. She wants to enjoy the connection, but she doesn't want to give you the full advantage of knowing how much she's interested. You might also find that certain women always seem to be in your line of sight, standing or sitting where they can observe you, even if they're not directly interacting. This isn't a coincidence, it's strategic positioning. She wants to keep you in her view, so she can assess and enjoy your presence without exposing herself too much. Some women go further and create opportunities to orbit around you, subtly integrating themselves into your space or conversations without direct invitation. They'll find reasons to be near you, passing by multiple times or conveniently joining groups you're already part of. To you it might feel random, but to her it's a calculated way to be close while still appearing casual. The most attractive men also notice that women tend to integrate themselves socially in ways that seem coincidental but aren't. She might join your table, slide into conversations you're part of, or align herself with your group at a gathering. It looks like chance, but it's her way of testing your receptiveness while embedding herself in your social world. These are not obvious actions like asking for your number or openly complimenting you, but they are unmistakable indicators of attraction once you know how to read them. The problem is that most men never learn to see them, and as a result, they dramatically underestimate their own value. When you start to recognize these subtle behaviors, the entire picture of attraction begins to shift. You begin to see that women communicate interest less through words and more through presence, positioning, and energy. A woman who finds you attractive doesn't need to declare it, she simply makes sure she's in your orbit. She passes by more than once, lingers just long enough to be noticed, or laughs a little louder when you're close. These actions may seem trivial when viewed in isolation, but together they form a clear pattern. What looks like coincidence is actually strategy. She is creating opportunities for connection while protecting herself from the vulnerability of direct rejection. This pattern becomes even clearer in group settings. Attractive men often notice that conversations shift when they enter the room. The energy rises, people become more engaged, and women subtly orient their bodies toward them. When you speak, others pause and listen, not necessarily because you've said something extraordinary, but because your presence carries weight. Psychologists call this the halo effect, where physical and social attractiveness unconsciously creates assumptions of competence, intelligence, and authority. You may not even notice this happening, because to you it feels normal. But the way people defer to your opinion, seek your approval, or pause when you interject are all indicators that you're exerting more influence than you realize. This influence shows up in countless ways. When you make a suggestion, people act on it more quickly. When you change the subject, others follow without hesitation. When you express a preference, the group accommodates it. These reactions are not random, they're the product of an unspoken recognition of your value. Attractive men underestimate themselves precisely because they get used to this treatment. They assume everyone is listened to in this way, but in reality, it's a reflection of how others perceive you. Your attractiveness doesn't just draw eyes, it shifts dynamics. Women also show attraction through mirroring, a subconscious psychological mechanism. Without realizing it, she'll copy your movements, posture, or energy level. If you lean back, she does the same. If you gesture while speaking, she'll echo the movement. If you touch your face or adjust your clothing, she'll unconsciously follow. This mirroring isn't about mimicry, it's about psychological attunement. Her body is syncing with yours as a way of building rapport. Over longer periods, women may even begin adopting elements of your mannerisms, speech patterns, or energy, integrating them into their own behavior. This is her way of internalizing your presence, a kind of unconscious flattery that reveals how deeply she's paying attention to you. Another powerful indicator that many men miss is how women describe you. Instead of complimenting your looks directly, women who are attracted often focus on your energy, the way you carry yourself, or how you make them feel. They'll say things like, "You have such a calm presence," or "There's something different about you." These statements sound vague, but they are reflections of deeper attraction. She might not even be able to articulate why she feels drawn to you, because it's not one factor, it's the combination of confidence, presence, and subtle signals that add up to overall magnetism. Think about the times when someone has told you, "There's just something about you." Most men brush that off, thinking it's meaningless, but in reality, that phrase is loaded. It means she's processing multiple layers of attraction simultaneously, so much so that she can't pin it on one thing. She senses something beyond the surface, something that lingers in her mind after you've left. That memorability is a hallmark of genuine attraction. If a woman mentions later that she was thinking about your conversation, or that you stood out to her, it means you've already left a psychological impression. Even in situations where no words are spoken, attraction leaves its mark. You may notice people's eyes following you across the room, conversations pausing as you approach, or groups adjusting their body language when you join. Women in particular will show repeated glances, not long stares but quick, recurring checks to see where you are and what you're doing. These micro-behaviors accumulate into undeniable evidence that you're drawing attention without trying. Most men never notice because they're too busy assuming that unless someone explicitly says something, it doesn't mean anything. But those small actions reveal more than words ever could. Men often underestimate themselves because they fail to see how other men react to them as well. When you're genuinely attractive, men treat you differently. Confident men will show respect, listen more attentively, and even align themselves with you socially. Less confident men, on the other hand, might respond with competitiveness, one-upmanship, or subtle undermining. They'll try to outshine you in conversation, dismiss your contributions, or exclude you from groups. These behaviors aren't random. They're responses to the fact that they perceive you as competition. The more threatened they feel, the more they'll attempt to reassert themselves. Ironically, these reactions from other men are some of the clearest indicators of your attractiveness. People don't compete against those they don't see as valuable. Attractive men also notice projection. Others assume you must have options, that women must already be interested in you, even when you haven't said anything about your dating life. People will casually comment, "I'm sure you get plenty of attention," or "You probably have someone already." These assumptions are reflections of how they perceive you, not of what you've claimed. When people project desirability onto you without proof, it means your presence already communicates value. You may not see it in yourself, but others do. The fascinating part is how invisible this all feels when you're the one experiencing it. Because it's subtle and indirect, you often dismiss it as coincidence. You tell yourself, "She was just being polite," or "He wasn't competing, he just talks that way." You minimize the meaning of these patterns, while in reality, they reveal exactly how much influence and attraction you carry. The danger is that by ignoring these signals, you continue to underestimate yourself, operating as though you're average when, in fact, you're standing out more than you know. One of the clearest ways attraction manifests is through shifts in group energy whenever you enter a space. Think about the last time you walked into a social setting and felt the atmosphere change. Maybe the conversation paused for just a moment, maybe people subtly turned to look at you, or maybe women adjusted their posture without realizing it. These are not coincidences. They are unconscious acknowledgements of presence, the kind that only happens when someone radiates a mix of confidence and appeal. You may not notice it because it feels so natural, but others do. The dynamic of a group is sensitive to hierarchy, and attractiveness often pushes you higher in that social order without effort. Women in particular show their attraction through shifts in behavior around you. Even when they have no claim over your attention, they might display territorial signals. They linger near you longer than necessary. They try to monopolize your focus in conversations, or they show flashes of jealousy when you engage with other women. These are not signs of arrogance on their part, they are responses to perceived value. A woman doesn't compete for a man she doesn't consider worth competing over. Her possessiveness is a direct reflection of how strongly she perceives your desirability. The same applies when you notice men becoming unusually competitive in your presence. They interrupt more, speak louder, or try to dominate attention. They are subconsciously trying to re-establish their position in a hierarchy that your presence has disrupted. Others, less aggressive but equally affected, might adopt your style, copy your grooming habits, or even mimic your mannerisms. When men start imitating you, it's because they perceive you as someone whose behavior brings results. They want to borrow a piece of your appeal for themselves. Whether through competition or imitation, their behavior confirms your impact. Another overlooked sign of attractiveness is the curiosity it generates. People begin asking questions about your personal life, not because you volunteered information, but because they want to understand how someone like you exists in the world. They wonder about your relationships, your preferences, and your history. Women in particular will probe gently, asking if you're seeing anyone, what kind of women you like, or what your type is. This curiosity reveals that they've already placed you in the category of desirable men, and are trying to assess whether they have a chance to fit into your story. The projection of status is another layer men often underestimate. When you carry yourself with confidence and presence, people automatically assume other areas of your life are equally impressive. They might imagine you have a high-powered career, strong financial stability, or valuable social connections, even without evidence. This projection happens because attractiveness creates an aura of success. It's not just about looks, it's about the combination of appearance, energy, and behavior that makes people unconsciously associate you with achievement. When you notice others assuming you're more successful or socially powerful than you've revealed, it's a sign they already perceive you as high value. Women often respond to this perception by amplifying their own efforts to align with you. They might dress differently around you, adjust their tone, or become more playful and engaging. Some will test boundaries lightly, teasing you or making small challenges as a way of gauging how you handle pressure. This testing isn't meant to push you away. It's designed to confirm whether the confidence they sense in you is genuine. Passing these subtle tests by staying calm, unreactive, and authentic only deepens their attraction because it signals that your appeal is not superficial but rooted in character. One reason attractive men often miss these signs is baseline adjustment. If you've been receiving these subtle signals for years, they stop feeling special and start feeling normal. You might think everyone gets treated this way, when in fact they don't. This is why so many men who are genuinely appealing to women underestimate themselves. They live inside their own experience, comparing themselves upward to idealized images of masculinity, while ignoring the consistent ways the world already treats them differently. What feels normal to you is exceptional compared to the average man. Age adds another dimension to this. Many men become more attractive as they grow older, not less. Life experience, emotional stability, and career achievement add layers that younger men can't replicate. Confidence built over years of overcoming challenges shows in posture, decision-making, and the way you carry yourself. Women notice this maturity and respond to it. A man who has discipline, stability, and wisdom radiates qualities that go far beyond physical appearance. That's why men in their 30s, 40s, and beyond often find themselves receiving more interest than they did in their 20s, even if they look the same or older. The combination of experience and self-assuredness compounds their attractiveness. When you factor in social networks and opportunities, the effect becomes even more powerful. Attractive men are invited into better circles, introduced to higher quality people, and included in events that amplify their appeal even further. Word travels, and your reputation as an interesting or desirable man extends beyond direct interactions. Women who haven't met you yet may already feel curious about you simply because of how others speak about you. This reputation amplification magnifies your influence and creates new opportunities you may not even realize are linked to your attractiveness. The danger, however, is that if you continue underestimating yourself, you miss out on maximizing these advantages. You settle for less than you deserve, downplay your own value, or fail to recognize opportunities that others would seize immediately. Self-awareness is the difference between stumbling through attraction blindly and using it consciously. Recognizing these signals isn't about inflating your ego, it's about aligning your self-perception with reality so you can make better choices. Women are drawn to men who act with grounded confidence, not arrogance, and the only way to achieve that balance is to see yourself clearly. The real transformation begins when you stop dismissing these subtle behaviors as coincidence and start recognizing them as evidence of your actual impact. The moment you realize that women position themselves near you intentionally, that conversations shift when you speak, that other men either compete with you or copy you, your entire sense of self starts to recalibrate. You stop living in the shadow of comparison to celebrities, models, or the most extreme examples of masculinity, and start measuring yourself by the reality unfolding around you. That shift from insecurity to accurate awareness is the foundation of authentic confidence. Authentic confidence is different from arrogance because it's grounded in truth rather than performance. Arrogance shouts, desperate to be validated. Confidence speaks softly because it already knows. When you recognize that you are in fact more attractive than you ever gave yourself credit for, you don't need to prove it to anyone. You don't need to exaggerate or seek attention. You simply operate from a calm sense of value, and that calmness itself becomes magnetic. Women are drawn to men who radiate assurance without needing to dominate or demand recognition. This awareness also transforms how you interact with women. Instead of second-guessing every glance or dismissing every act of attention, you start engaging with appropriate certainty. When she lingers near you, you no longer assume it's random, you take it as a sign of interest. When she asks subtle questions about your life, you recognize the curiosity behind them. When she mirrors your movements or adjusts her energy to match yours, you see it as proof of her attunement rather than coincidence. This recognition allows you to respond in ways that create connection, instead of letting opportunities slip by unnoticed. At the same time, you must guard against complacency. Realizing that you are more attractive than you thought should not be an excuse to stop growing. The most magnetic men are those who continue to evolve, adding layers to their appeal through personal development, emotional intelligence, and life experience. Attraction compounds, just like interest in an investment account. Every new skill, achievement, and improvement adds weight to the value you already carry. Over time, that compound effect makes you not only attractive but unforgettable. This is why the balance between confidence and humility is so crucial. Humility keeps you approachable, relatable, and grounded. Confidence ensures you claim your space, set your standards, and pursue opportunities that reflect your true value. Together, they create the rare combination of power and warmth, dominance and approachability that women find irresistible. A man who can command respect without demanding it, and who can remain humble while knowing his worth, embodies the kind of balance that defines long-term appeal. Recognizing your true attractiveness also changes the way you approach relationships. Instead of chasing validation from women who treat you as though you're average, you start aligning with those who recognize and value your presence. You stop tolerating dynamics where your attention is taken for granted, and start choosing situations that amplify your strengths. This doesn't make you entitled, it makes you selective, and selectivity is one of the strongest signals of value you can send. When you know you're desirable, you don't need to prove it by accepting every interaction. You demonstrate it by being intentional with your choices. Another profound effect of this awareness is the way it reshapes your self-image. For years, you may have lived under the belief that you were invisible, ordinary, or unremarkable, but the truth is that others have been noticing you, responding to you, and competing for your attention in ways you ignored. Once you align your perception with reality, that old self-image crumbles. You see yourself not through the distorted lens of insecurity, but through the evidence of lived experience. And that new self-image gives you permission to step into the full measure of who you are. This is not about becoming arrogant or manipulating others, it's about accurate self-perception. Most men live either in self-delusion, overestimating their appeal, or in self-denial, underestimating it. Very few find the middle ground of clear, grounded awareness. But that middle ground is where true power lies. Because when you know your value, you stop trying to prove it and start using it wisely. You don't need validation because you carry validation within. You don't chase attention because you understand that attention already follows you. You don't fear competition because you recognize that competition is just proof of your influence. So the question becomes, will you continue underestimating yourself, walking through life blind to the signals all around you? Or will you start paying attention to the reality that you are more attractive, more influential, and more magnetic than you've been led to believe? The choice is yours. Awareness is the first step. With it, you unlock confidence that doesn't crumble under pressure, humility that doesn't slip into self-doubt, and growth that doesn't plateau. Without it, you risk wasting years settling for less than you deserve. If you've ever wondered why women linger in your orbit, why conversations pause when you speak, or why other men either respect or compete with you, now you know. These are not random moments, they are the evidence of your true appeal. Stop dismissing them. Stop downplaying yourself. Recognize what's real. Because once you do, everything about the way you move through the world changes. Your confidence, your choices, your relationships, and ultimately, your results. The truth is simple, you've always been more attractive than you realized. It's time to start living like it.